Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, and welcome to Linda's Conscious Talks, and I'm your host, Linda Summers, and we've got another great show for you, and it's the last show with Dr. Dubroff, so if you guys are out there listening, you've got to check out the other shows, and I will tell you which each of those shows are, but today's topic is the BioElectric body, electromagnetic theory of healing, and there is a correlation, which I don't know a whole lot about that, with craniosacral, so we'll dive into all this conversation about this and see what this is all about, because I am totally interested. So before I go any further, I just want to welcome Dr. Dubroff back to the show.
Hi, Linda. Thank you. Good. How are you?
You're welcome. Great. Thanks. Well, before we get started, I want to let people know, the listeners, so if you haven't tuned in to any of the shows, you really want to tune in because there's such fascinating information, a wealth of information, how you can really promote your body to heal yourself, how you can heal yourself, and how you can do this through Dr. Dubroff and the different modalities that he has. He does a lot more than what we've even talked about on these 5 shows. There's not enough shows. I mean, we haven't done enough shows to really be able to go into the depth of detail of really what a lot of he does. So, tune into these shows because it really is, you'll get some information that you never even knew or thought about. So June 1st was naturopathy medicine, how we promote the body to heal itself. June 8th was the body can heal itself, transforming the placebo effect into real medicine. And June 15th was classical homeopathy, transformational healing. And last week was craniosacral, increasing CNS circulation and function. And so, again, today is the BioElectric body, electromagnetic theory of healing. So, gosh, that was a mouthful. So, here we go. This topic, last week I had mentioned it, and I was like, gosh, this is going to be a really juicy topic, like BioElectric, body, because I know we're made of, I don't want to say we're made of electric, but, we're energy, so whatever that means, I'm not really sure, but this is where you come into play. So what does all that mean?
It's bioelectric. It means when you go to, starting in pre-med school, one of the main things they talk about through physiology, your physiology classes, cellular physiology, biochemistry, they talk a lot about what's called the sodium-potassium pump. And I think I'm going to be talking more philosophy tonight. It's not even philosophy, it's science. But, none of this is philosophy. It's science and experiments. But, at the start of, the evolution of the cell, you basically have what's called a bilipid membrane. And it divides, it separates the external environment from the internal environment of the cell. But there still needs to be communication across the cell, to the outside and to the inside. And what the body's evolution did is the way it maintained this bilipid membrane and the movement of energies and the shuttling of resources across was by opening and closing these gates. And it happens via a number of different chemicals. But I think, I'm probably saying that a lot of people are like, duh. But actually it's quite magical because the way it does this is it takes, like positive charged, like potassium and sodium, for instance, like the sodium-potassium pump, and just they both have a charge and they're both a form of an element on the periodic table. And it pushes all of them on one side. So the sodium's all on one side, let's say the external portion of the cell, and I believe I just said the sodium, and then the potassium, say, is on the internal side. And then so there's all this physical force to get to switch sides. And the sodium-potassium pump is what causes an electrical gradient across the body, because the second you let some of that sodium in, it, to the other side or interior, it depolarizes the cellular membrane. I know this is maybe kind of an intense conversation, but in depolarizing the cellular membrane, because these molecules are flowing to the other side, it just propagates all these chemicals then to just go down the line like dominoes, and that's literally what an electrical impulse in the body is. So, that's some of the underpinning physiology of what I mean by biophysics and the beauty of the body. If you just stop and think about it, I don't know if anybody knows what, this is the last comment of this, but if anybody knows what thermodynamics is, it's really incredible, because thermodynamics, one of its postulates is nothing is ever made anew and nothing is ever destroyed.
Right.
So, yeah, and then also things spread out in the environment, Like if you release a gas, it's just going to evenly spread out in the environment. So how did we ever get an evolutionary situation where we would create a bilipid membrane and store charged particles on one side, and on the other side have another? That's totally against thermodynamics and physics. But it's the real basis of life, single cell organisms. That was the beginning of life. How did that happen? It's kind of mysterious. So, and the other side of that, just to finish that, and then get to normal conversation, wherever you have an electrical impulse, you have a magnetic impulse. So you can look, it's the same thing if you look at our solar system, as you look subatomic physics and the, atomic structure, you have like a sun in the middle, of the solar system, and in the cell you have a nucleus, and then you have, you have different, electrons and positrons floating around, and you can see that from a magnification to be a similar thing. But anyways, so because you can see it on this from a small to a large scale, there's an electrical component throughout those small scales and large scales. You have these magnetic fields that are different from electrical fields interacting and creating things, and you have to wonder if life was created by some of that magnetic force that's floating around separate from the electrical force. And after maybe we go through a little exchange, I'd love to talk a little about something called the observer effect in physics, because it's quite beautiful. Kind of comes out of that. But
what was it? The observer effect? The observer effect?
Yeah. Well, I'll say it now. Yeah, the observer effect is really cool. I mean, everyone is always talking about how, we're all the same thing.
Right.
And physics really wouldn't violate that thought. So, and this really says a lot to, if we're going to heal. I've talked a lot, kind of a theoretical, what we can do if we funnel our energies, what we could do and what we could become to take charge of our life, which is very difficult. Even then I have some theories about that. But a lot of the underpinnings of this and support of this, it's not just contemplation, it's physical experimentation and the physics community proving it. And one of the more interesting things is something called the observer effect. It was just, basically, it's like, how much of this do I say? But I'll rattle it off very quickly because people can listen to this again, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because so it'll be, people will be able to listen to the show. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you're going to want to listen to this a few times. I'm going to say it quickly and you probably won't get it. But all the more interesting because then maybe you weren't meant to get it. But it's something worth getting. It will really make life such a mystery. Physicists came together to understand something called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Heisenberg was a physicist. And he basically said a proton has a spin and a velocity. It moves and it has a certain charge to it. I'm sorry, it has a position and a velocity. So it's in one place in one time, but it's also moving. And you can't know about both of those components. You can know about its position or you can know about its velocity. But if you look at its velocity, you lose track of its position. If you look at its position, you lose track of its velocity. Mm-hmm. And that mirrors all life. If we just think about our psychological existence, you're trying to understand yourself and you're looking at yourself in a moment. And then you say, wait a minute, I'm not just this moment, I'm these string of moments. And then when you attach these string of moments, you think, well, but this one moment was really significant in my life, and you start flip-flopping back and forth. And I thought that's just what it means to analyze yourself. That's something you have to wrestle with. But because you can't have both of them, physics came up with an idea to try to get some information here. And what they did is they took a photon, which is something that moves at the speed of light, and they split it into two sister photons, and they took information about its velocity and its position. And in position, they were talking about its spin, kind of the way it moves, more or less.
Right.
And then they changed, the spin of one of the molecules at a certain point, and then they took some information about the difference because they had its velocity, they had what one would do with its position unaltered and what the other one would do with an altered position. And then after that, they decided, well, let's say the experiment lasts, 5 seconds. And they said at the fourth second, at the second second, they would change the position or the spin of one of the sister photons. And then at the fourth second, before the fifth second, which would be the end, the fifth second is the end, the fourth second, they would change that position back, making the two molecules identical. And what was fascinating, right, is, you break the photon in two at second one. Second two, you change the position of one, and then at second four, it's supposed to go through a device that changes it back. But at second three, it changed back. So otherwise, it changed back to its prior position before we put into place the thing that was going to change it.
Right.
There's many experiments about it, but science only defines what it can say from an experiment. They don't know why it happens, and we see it in all sorts of things when you're dealing with subatomic particles. That's the key thought, subatomic particles, but, we're still made out of subatomic particles. But the key thought there, what they said was, well, you can't experiment on subatomic particles because your observation of them changes their behavior. Your observations of them change their behavior. And they're moving at the speed of light. There should be nothing quicker than the speed of light unless our assumptions about the speed of light are all wrong. So what does that mean? That your attention and your observation to a subatomic particle must change what it's doing. It must. Because we've seen in experiments time in and time again. So this idea of healing yourself, this idea of, I think so many of us nowadays say, you really got to watch out for what you think. I think probably maybe in the dark ages no one worried about that as much. The thought wasn't as, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we're more deluded by the media. But, we're fanciful and philosophical in our thought. We got so much open to us. But, so we talk about, I forget what it's called, but, just what you keep will persist, basically.
Right. Or where your attention goes.
What you're saying to the universe, will happen.
Yes.
And just the last comment, then conversation, if you want to read about the research with this, and I believe I've talked about it once in the show, there's an MD named Larry Dossey Jr., Dossey. He has 2 books. One of them defines the research, mostly based with prayer, but he's not saying it from a religious standpoint. I think that was more of a marketing statement because, everyone recognizes what prayer means. Reality, it's a reality there. Prayer is a reality, not necessarily within this religious or that religious doctrine, but it does happen. And he shows all the research, and he says, based on the research, this is the way we should pray. And that might be mechanical for people, but it's scientifically validated through that body of work that he presents in those 2 books.
Wow. Now, that was mentioned in the first show. When we did the first show on June 1st, you did mention that. Do you have the name of the book on that one?
It's Larry unfortunately, I don't remember the name of the first one, which is all the research. The second book is Larry Dossey Jr., Prayer is Good Medicine, and it is based on the first book, how you would proceed with such prayer operations.
Well, what's interesting, because really when you're talking about the observer effect, which I feel that this really does tie into what we were really talking about as far as the bioelectric body and the electromagnetic, all that stuff that you were saying, right?
And that it's all interconnected. All magnetism must be interconnected. That's my point of bringing the observer effect. It has to be. It's interconnected in you, and it's also not something that you are part and parcel to in ownership. It can't be, because there's a huge magnetic wave flowing through from plants to any other life form, and who knows, maybe inorganic matter too. Certainly there is, there's gravitation, which is probably a form of magnetism, although that's, maybe not. That's large mass bodies, right? The pull between two mass bodies.
I was just going to say, on the observer, there's so much I could probably say on that, but what comes to my mind, which is, is there a something that you use, like you have the prolotherapy, because I still want to tie this into the observer effect of how we can actually take that and apply that into the promoting of the body to heal itself or healing our body, but is there something that you do or that you have as a modality that you apply in helping people, assist them in treatment of different conditions of the body?
Yeah, there were two major ones that apply within the realm of it for me. And I do want to kind of state to anyone listening, these kind of concepts are my love. So when Linda first asked me to talk, no matter, there's so much I could talk about in medicine. There's so much I love, but the underpinnings of why I got into medicine is all of this. So this is what I find myself talking about, but if you were to see me in person, it would be a little different, unless you brought up the conversation, that is. Then we'd have to be careful of time. But, I mean, homeopathy, once again, for me, homeopathy is about kind of locating a similar frequency. So you're understanding the person through a triangulation of symptoms. The presentation of their chief complaint, and this means not just, I have difficulty breathing, therefore I have asthma. That's just the genetic definition of asthma. But, are you worse in the morning? Are you worse at night? Does it come on with certain emotional responses? What is the history of it? Do you get constipation when you get asthma? These things talk about your presentation. It also talks about the disposition of the individual. So disposition, it feels like a psychological interpretation, but really it's defining the type of nervous system we're dealing with, its sensitivities, its association with different emotional qualities and such. And through this triangulation, the third one would be general physiological responses. Through this triangulation, you're looking to present a medicine as opposed to in opposites, like depression, antidepressants, right? If you're depressed, you give an antidepressant. That's an opposite effect. And it never cures it, which isn't too surprising because it's opposite. In homeopathy, you give a similar medicine. Within the medicine that contains of all those symptoms is a similar state. And in physics, there's something called standing waves. If you're a musician, you know what I'm talking about, maybe, which is just that, two waves of equal magnitude and amplitude can't coexist, and they cancel each other out. So homeopathy, I think, for me, is a really good example of biomagnetic treatments because, you're looking for a frequency, you will, in something that is wrong in the individual, and you're looking for a substance that can reproduce that frequency to cancel them out via, a theory of standing waves. And then craniosacral without, we talked about craniosacral a lot last week, but for me that would be a similar effect, sharing of magnetic fields with intention of just really falling into the body and feeling very subtle energies that are there. And those subtle energies, to me, probably have a lot to do with electromagnetism.
Well, that's interesting because, my thought was with all of this it was like a machine or something, because I've heard of different, I've actually experienced something, biomagnetic energy thing or something like that, where they kind of hook you up with like electrodes and it's reading the energy of your body. And that's what I really thought this was, but it's more of the biomagnetic I don't want to, the word I get is like atmosphere, or the sensation, or what's happening in the nervous system, I guess, of the person's body. And that's where the homeopathy really comes into play, because you're finding out following you with that?
Yeah, more or less, but it's larger than that. It's not just the nervous system. You're trying to find all the parts to create this state that is there. So you have a laundry list of symptoms, and you're trying to triangulate it on different basis. Once again, general physiological features, menstruation, perspiration, sleep, dietary responses. Maybe people can't eat in the morning, or they'll throw up or something. Who knows? That might even be their chief complaint. And the disposition of the character and the chief complaint. So it's more than any one place. It's really triangulating the state. If you were to read a book called The Organon by Samuel Hahnemann, which is the founder of homeopathy, he talks about a morbid state that is cast upon the body, and the body doesn't have the ability to differentiate from its force and the force of disease in a way. And therefore, he says, we need to aid the body in recognizing the nature of that force that is morbid in its effect upon the body, and present a medicine that could dispel that morbidity. Morbidity isn't quite the right word. He meant it differently, you know. And those two will create a frequency of effect, which is very electrical and magnetic, because probably you have to have that very exact wave frequency for them to meet and greet and be surprised, so to say, or, you know, the kind of thought.
Right. So it's kind of what you have been working with me with. It's really going in, also diving into what I've noticed is diving into, because if we're talking about this, is of the emotional state of it as well. So it's not just what you were saying. It's not just the nervous system. Or it's just not just the symptoms, but really all this whole month, we've been really talking about is what you do is you're getting to the core issue, and that can stem off from. It can be from the emotion to affect the body, which I think is very fascinating to think that.
Yeah, but at the same time, you know, just stick with Samuel Hahnemann's ideas, you can't ever see disease. It's unseen.
No.
So what you see its expressions, and you really can't separate what is of the person and what is of a disemboweled relationship with nature, right? The idea is maybe that there would be some way that if you could really plug into what the truth out there is, and maybe the truth is the relationship and all the connections and all the intertwining of all this electromagnetism flowing through the universe, flowing through you like you were a minnow in the sea, you know? So there I go, losing my track.
Yeah. Well, what comes to my mind. Oh, do you have a thought there?
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, what comes to my mind is, and this kind of brings a little bit of the observer effect into it. Well, maybe, but is it possible that when we have a certain disease, let's just say, that it could be where a certain disease, say it is asthma or it's a skin condition or something like that, could that be where at the emotional level that the only way to, at first I think it first becomes a thought, and then it becomes a feeling of something else is not right going on in my body, and then it becomes a physical condition.
Yeah.
So
once again, I agree with Samuel Hahnemann. There's no way that we can fully know. But here's the one thing that we all know. Although our material Western perspectives don't allow us to investigate this, we all know. We all know that when you don't feel good, your susceptibilities come out. When you feel good, your asthma just isn't as bad. Literally, you can maintain everything better when you're under stress. Things. So we all know that that's there. We might not understand how it happens because we are that which is it. It's hard to investigate something that is beyond you. So the investigation of anything has to do, I think, with the capacity to understand that. So, we're mostly carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in great percentages. I think I've told you this before. And there's all these other elements on the periodic table. But if life is a combination and relationship to all potential elements, whether we know them or not on the periodic table, addition to each one of them, like A to B to A to C, A to D, A to E, so 1 plus 2 is 3, 1 plus 3 is 4, and so on, it would also be a multiplication. So instead of, 1 to 2 doesn't work in multiplication. But yeah, it would. So on multiplication would be 1 to 2 is 2, 1 to 3 is 3, and so on. And there'd be all these millions of combinations. So if you have like 80 elements, the possibilities are endless. And we already know much more than 80 on the periodic table, I believe, though I don't know them all. So I know there is only 80. But the point being is we're only carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Our relationship with things are fixed. So the idea in Western society that we could ever figure out the nature of things, I don't think is plausible because we're such a small fraction of its computations and relationships with things. So, we can figure out things, but to understand its true nature, we're too much of a product of it in limited constructs.
Right. Well, that's kind of where, and correct me if I'm wrong, where, for me, I think how the observer effect comes into that play, because this is what it means for me, what I'm hearing you say, but I could be wrong, is that that one could observe. It's almost like we step back from ourselves and we start to observe what we're thinking, what we're feeling. It's like, there's kind of this sort of separation that happens. It's like one looking and observing at themselves and noticing, it's like if I have something going on and noticing this, whatever this is going on, and stepping away from that, not literally, but within my mind's eye, I guess you could say. Am I making any sense?
Well, it does, but functionally I think what I'm saying is it is impossible for us to use us to understand things. We all know this to some extent. No matter how we try to solve some problem we have, we just don't seem to do it that well with talk. We seem to do better by just looking in the mirror and saying, I feel happy today. And then all of a sudden you're happy. We've all noticed that. We look in the mirror one day and we see the ugliest creature we've ever seen. Next day, and as long as we keep feeling that way, we see the same picture. But then one day we wake up and we see something totally different. No relationship and no understanding. And I think what I'm saying to this is the observer effect is much more. It says much more than just your feelings and your relationships to your feelings. It literally says that you alter subatomic particles. You are not in charge of them, but they do respond to your intentions towards them. And it must mean, as much as other physics says, and if we have the time, I'd go over some of that. But it must mean that we're the same thing. It must mean that we have capacity to things, and there are some operations. You look at through any religious component and dispelling the identity, whether it be through meditation, fasting. The Native Americans did something a little more brutal with their pain ceremonies. It was only certain tribes. Overcoming pain, though. If you can overcome pain, you can overcome the identity. Now, I'm not suggesting anyone actually do that, but it's the same thing. You see this throughout all religious fundamentals of finding God, which is annihilating identity. When you're capable of doing that, when you spend time with that, I am a strong believer that what we see in the research with subatomic particles, like the observer effect, there's many more experiments I could talk about and many more aspects of interesting physics. But when we get into that, we open up to the nature of the truth in this electromagnetic pool of energy. We are the things that's in the way. It's not the truth that's in the way, it's us.
Exactly. Well, we've got 5 seconds left. So I mean, what a fascinating show. How interesting is this? I mean, really, thank you so much for being on the show all this month, sharing your passion with us, really, and the wealth of knowledge and to the depth, detail of that you go in, that you know that you can. It really does show your passion. So, really, listeners, if you're out there, watch the shows, listen to these shows, because. And call, Dr. Dubroff. You can reach him at 949-444-4884. You can also go to his website, which is holisticsolutions.doc.com. Get in touch with him. And we just want to thank all the listeners who joined us today and all the ones who will be joining us via YouTube. We thank you so much. Please follow, subscribe, comment, and like. And you can join us this week, July 9th, for the next show is Recovering the Psyche After Addiction with Deanne Addison. So, Dr. Dubroff, really, thank you so much. It was just such an education and a really awareness this whole month of just, everything that we've talked about. It's really enlightened me, so I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's fun. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, well, thank you so much, and hopefully we'll have you back on the show another time in the future, and we can have some more conversations. So if not, listeners, really check out these. Yeah, I'd love it. So check out the shows June 1st, June 8th, June 15th, June 29th, and today, July 6th. All right, we'll see you guys this Thursday. Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Dubroff.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Linda.
All right, bye.